Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Two Cycles, One Economy, how circularity actually works across industries. My name is Juan Carlos Monterrey Gomez, probably the longest name that you will hear at EarthX. And I am proud to serve as the climate envoy for the Republic of Panama. And I want to start by saying that I'm very excited about this panel because I'm also going to learn a lot. Even though circularity and plastic is part of my portfolio, it's a new topic. I'm not an expert on it, and that's why I was so excited when Sandy invited me to moderate this conversation. I just want to mention a little bit about my beautiful country because I always need to advocate for it. We are a sustainability champion. We have protected 34% of our land, 60% of our oceans. We're going for more. We're leading coalitions for an ambitious plastic treaty. I'm the head of delegation to the UN plastic treaty negotiations. And I also coordinate the portfolio for Climate Cup, Biodiversity Cup, the certification oceans, and a bunch of other stuff. So Panama is here at EarthX because we believe that in order to fast track and accelerate action in all these fronts, we need to walk and work hand by hand with the private sector. And Sandy, thank you so much for the opportunity to be here with you today. We have an amazing lineup of speakers. We have Sacni Leon, Head of Global Inbound Inventory Control, Reverse Logistics and Circularity Operations at Logitech. Probably the longest title that you will also hear at EarthX. We have Scott Rubenstein, Vice President of Agricultural Services at Perdue Agribusinesses. And then we also have my dear friend, Sandra Leyva, Head of Sustainability Americas for CHEP. So let's go right into why we are here. When we use the phrase circular economy, we sometimes believe it is only one thing, but it is not. It is two completely different systems, each with its own logic, its own hierarchy of value, and its own way of failing when things get wrong. The first is what most people picture when they hear this phrase. I call it the technical cycle. It's about products, it's about materials, the things that we design, manufacture, use, and eventually discard. The key insight in this is the closer a product stays to its original form and function, the more value it preserves. We have a hierarchy for this. The best thing that you can do is maintain a product in use. Next, best thing is to reuse it, then refurbish it, then remanufacture it. And at the very bottom of this ladder, as the last resource, not the first response, we should recycle it. The second cycle that we're going to be learning about today is of a completely different kind. It is called the biological cycle, the world of soil, water, forest, biodiversity, the living systems that make our life possible. You cannot maintain a forest the way that you maintain a machine. You cannot reuse a depleted aquifer. These systems don't circulate. They regenerate if they do. Sometimes they simply cannot. That's why we need to protect them. We need to conserve them. And when they really cannot regenerate, the consequences fall so hard on the communities that are the least responsible for this. Now, the number I want you all to remember from this session. The global economy only has a 7% of circularity. That means 93% of everything out there is still not circular. And who better than this amazing lineup of speakers to explain to us what they're doing and how we can accelerate action on this front. The three leaders you're about to hear from today are working on closing that gap and pushing that 7%. We're going to start with a round of interventions from each one of these amazing speakers. And let's start with the biological cycle because it is the one that is the hardest to see, the hardest to measure, and carries the longest consequences when it fails. So, Scott, I'm looking at you. Perdue is one of the largest food and agricultural companies in the United States, and your work is directly related to helping about 9,000 family farms to get there. And you started treating carbon as a specialty crop. So give us your insight. What are you doing and what we should be doing?
Well, thank you very much, and thank you for having me. As the introduction is shown on the screen here, I'm with Perdue Farms and Perdue Agribusiness. We produce poultry and other proteins as a food ecosystem, and so working with 9,000 farmers up and down the East Coast is extremely important for us. Working with them on regenerative agriculture, that would be implementing no-till, cover crops, using biologicals to improve soil health, working on biodiversity both above and below ground in terms of ensuring that these soils can handle the next generation of weather events, et cetera. And so what we do is we invest in our farmers. Without our farmers, we have no grain. We can't produce feed, we can't produce chicken, we can't deliver safe and nutritious food to your shelf. So farmers are the lifeblood of our business, and without them, there is no business. So maintaining this biological circularity is so important. So taking litter from our chickens, litter that would be chicken manure, chicken poop, and putting it back on the acre, right? And making sure that biology helps feed the microbes. Using no-till, where you're just making a tiny little slit when you're planting the seed, not turning over the soil and destroying soil structure. These are very, very important practices and are hard for some farmers to implement because they've been trained in other ways for many, many generations. And so we're sort of turning the clock back. We're going back to ensure that we're not competing with nature, but we're working with nature and allowing nature to regenerate itself for the long term. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Scott. Your story and what you do really resonates with me because I come from a small farm in Panama, and I know that a lot of the work that you're trying to push has to do with culture change, because farmers have been doing, what they do the same way for so long. And my hardest student is my own dad. I'm the climate envoy for my nation, but the student that I struggle the most is with my dad. Now he's pushing away fertilizers, not because they are bad, but because he knows I don't like them. But that's a good step. I mean, that's a good first step, and I'm still working on him. So now let's talk about the other cycle, the technical cycle, and no one better than Sandra from Logitech to talk about this. Logitech makes hardware, consumer electronics, one of the hardest category to make circular because your product ends up in a drawer or a landfill long before it should. Walk us through what you're doing to stop this, and tell us a little bit more about that amazing facility that you were telling me at the beginning of this session.
Yeah, so at Logitech, we really care for making sustainability and circularity part of everything we do. And so it doesn't just start on the aftermath. It's really from the way that we design products, the way that we move products, the way we educate consumers on the usage of our products. And my part of the job is leveraging reverse logistics and bringing in the product and doing the best that we can with it. So the models that I support go from refurbishment, re-commerce. We have for me, it's one of my favorite ones. We have an open box product donation program where we take products to underfunded children and schools that would not have the ability to get to our equipment. And so we are trying to help them improve their education. We also do recycling, material extraction. We also offer trade-in. So for Logitech for Business, we offer a trade-in program where if people want to get new devices, we offer the option to recycle them responsibly, which is a key piece of making sure that our journey doesn't end when somebody buys the product. We are really taking into consideration anything that happens with our product until its end of life. And we put all those programs together at a global scale where we support this in every country that we do business in.
That is absolutely fantastic, and I commend you for that incredible logistics that you have on taking on, the older products, because ultimately, it's part of your responsibility as a serious ethical company, not only trying to move us forward in development through tech, but also on keeping the world in good health so that we can develop more and be better off. Yep. So now we're going to talk about how these two cycles come together. And Sandra, Apologies, my dear friend. CHEP is one story in this room that basically runs both cycles at the same time. 347 million assets that not only avoid landfill, but are pushing a commitment to become the first regenerative supply chain by restoring forests that made those assets possible in the first place. How are you doing that?
Well, I always have a lot of fun in explaining how we work because we work with the leading brands and retailers in more than 60 countries. Many people don't know about these 347 million assets that are constantly being shared, repair, and reuse. And that's actually why I added a little diagram there. How it works, we don't sell any of our assets, we rent them. We issue them to a brand, then the brand puts the product ships it to a distributor. We pick it up from the distributor, we repair it, and we put it back in circulation. This is very important because many people do not understand the difference between the linear economy and the circular economy when it comes to transactions and the interaction with your value chain actors, because in linear economy, when you look at the point of sale, that's the last interaction that you have most of the times. When you think about circular economy and particularly about reusable assets, every cycle is giving you information in order to make your operations more efficient for you and the customers. And we're using that data now to translate or to marry together operational insights with environmental impacts. Now, I explained a little bit how we work because that's a technical cycle, but I added a little bit about our sustainability program because that's what has enabled to get the trophy case that I like to say that we have on the down. All of the recognitions are there not because only this virtuous cycle that we have in our operations, but the ambition that we have to go further. And I think that that's what allows me to talk about the biological cycle. Since our pallets are made of timber, we didn't want to stop with a closed loop system. We really wanted to challenge ourselves to think what we could do upstream. So we started to invest in regenerative forestry programs. So particularly, we have two big projects, one in Tabasco and one in sub-Saharan Africa, in Zambia. And in Tabasco specifically, the one that I wanted to explain you, we aim to restore 37,800 acres. Half of them are set for conservation and half of them are set for our timber needs. But there's a very big component and something that I want to dive deeper as we talk about this, because it's not only the environmental side of things, but also the social part of things. If you are in that position, if you're trying to do insetting or investing in regenerative agriculture, regenerative forestry, you always need to loop in the community because you have the opportunity to create economic impact, social impact, as well as many other things in order to transform an entire region. That's a little bit of what we do.
Thank you so much, Sandy. You just heard a rapid intervention or introduction of what they do in each one of their companies. Different geographies, different sectors, but all focus on closing that gap. So, very frequently, businesses stop at compliance. People like you, heads of sustainability, chief sustainability officers, have initiatives that try to go beyond compliance. But sometimes, that focus on just the compliance might limit, the push that you're trying to do within the company. How do you manage that? How do you make sure that those barriers are overcome and you push further in the work as we need you to do? Scott, want to give it a try?
Great, thank you for the question. So building a resilient supply chain is super important, especially as a branded company that faces consumers. The next generations that are coming, we feel really are interested in sustainability, interested in products that are circular, and they're demanding these brands like Perdue to help them with that, right? And so it's very, very critical that we look across our supply chain, both from an upstream perspective, working with farmers to build soil health, and then connecting that with our downstream partners like the larger brands and Walmarts and Costco's, et cetera, and working together and collaborating across the value chain where we can find ways to optimize and build a more circular, sustainable economy while delivering, nutritious food that is affordable and building food security for our nation. So it's really important that we continue as a company and as a brand. We feel this traceability from seed to consumer adds to our brand equity as well. And we feel consumers really want to know where their food is coming from, and we're going to do our part to help train consumers to understand the great things that farmers and you all are implementing from a sustainability perspective. It's extremely important, and everybody has a part in that, and a role in that job. So, thank you.
Anybody else wants to take a shot at that question?
So for Logitech, I mean, we're fortunate that even though we have a team of sustainability is part of every single piece of work that we do. And so it starts with the material choices that go into our products, the way that we manufacture the product, the way that we also educate customers about the purchase and the carbon impact of their purchases. I don't know if any of you have seen, but we actually use almost like a calorie count label that you guys will see on food. We do it on carbon for our products. And we actually shared this externally for other companies to adopt that so that we can educate consumers in the impact of their purchases and the products that they're using. I think we have to not only do this, most of our systems are like one way, and so really bringing the circularity into the new business models that we're creating and the company structure. It's not easy, but I think it takes a lot of work and resilience to be able to deliver to that. And at least for me, I try to share as much as possible on how we do it and why we do it, because that's the only way that we can drive change.
Sandy?
I guess that from our side, why we don't stop at compliance, because we have a lot of data and we want to share it with the customers, right? Like, we understand that everyone is struggling right now to make sustainability actionable. I don't know if you're facing the same. Our budgets are all dedicated to reporting. So if you can provide someone the operational data to take action, to tell a fulfillment center, hey, you can operate on a different way instead of investing more, that's the first lever. So we try to use it to really grow the business in a responsible way and just to create a virtuous cycle, because compliance is not going to give you that exactly. Yes, it's going to give some type of assurance, but it's not going to give you a step forward to strengthen the relationship or to truly start taking steps later into conversations more related to innovation or more forward-looking, long-term type of decisions.
Thank you. Thank you so much to all of you. So right now we talked about technical barriers, potential budgetary barriers, but there might be another barrier that is more about the motivation. So at least in my case, I work on diplomacy, very slow, results almost never get to the point of ambition that we want them. So 30% of my job is keeping my team motivated that yes, we need to keep going. Yes, we fail 5 times this year in all the negotiations, but next year is a new year, and we need to keep pushing because this is the right thing. I bet at the corporate level, you also face this sort of barriers. So could you just share with us, how do you keep your team motivated when those budgetary barriers are there? Sandy just told us that you have the data, and I bet that motivates your team and your company to keep pushing. But I also want to hear from Scott and from Sacni, how do you keep your team motivated when times are rough?
I'm a very persistent person, so probably I make sure they are engaged and motivated. I really see this as an opportunity, and especially on the reverse and circularity, we were seen as a cost center, and nobody wanted to deal with it. And so really, it starts with my team for them to see that we are a value-generating center. We're not a cost center. And once they see the opportunities and how much we can do for the company, so that they can actually be more interested and be more engaged. And I keep on pushing, and sometimes I even say to myself, maybe I should just give myself a break, move on to the next thing. But I'm personally very passionate about this, because circularity before it was an afterthought, and right now it's a requirement, right? Mm-hmm. Consumers, when they're buying a product, they're buying it being a lot more conscious of their purchase. And so my job is to make sure that my team gets as engaged as I am. Mm-hmm. And I'm very lucky that the company backs us up on all the things that we want to do.
Fantastic. Sandy, you want to give it a try?
Yeah, of course. I try to get creative with my team. We have an endless possibility of data. I know in sustainability, it's always a push and pull conversation at the end of the day. You cannot always be pushing, and you always need to be aware as well on how your stakeholder is perceiving the initiative that you want to put in front of them, meaning customers, meaning investors, meaning your leadership. So when you're not pushing upwards, like to pitch an idea, just build the foundation. See which buckets of the organization you can build as you're kind of recharging. And particularly with your team, I mean, diversify. It's not always on trying like to build a new initiative, but when do you take the time to really get them to upskill themselves in specific critical skills that we need at some point, no? Sustainability is evolving very, very quickly, and we always think about like, how do we sell the next thing? How do we get the next project going? Sometimes I think that we need to take a pause and take a step back, and at least in my case, it has just caused like to have high-performing teams because they feel supported, they feel the empathy, and they also feel understood. I think that that's the most important thing when it comes to our teams.
Scott?
Great, and thank you. From a Perdue perspective, our CEO, Kevin McAdams, has challenged everybody in the business to raise a better future. The Perdue family has had stewardship in our core values for generations. Jim Perdue has a master's in marine biology as well, 1 billion oysters around the Chesapeake Bay to help clean water. He knows the importance of circularity and working with farmers to implement these practices. And so we want to innovate, right? And when the CEO challenges the entire business to innovate and to look at things differently and to drive change, that impacts our local communities too. Outreach and education, extremely important. But we have that brand strength too that we want to incorporate and reach out to consumers and help train those, even in Washington, on where their food comes from. So we're pretty excited about it. And when we bring that innovation and excitement to our marketing teams, to our logistics teams, to our finance teams, we have people stepping up and raising their hands. So instead of running away, we're leaning into it. And we feel that'll be a long-term play for us.
Fantastic. So now let's talk about a little bit about bureaucracy, because it's a term usually that relates to government, but it's everywhere, in every organization. And Sandy, you did mention that a lot of the budget in sustainability usually goes to reporting. So I'm going to try to explain what we see on the government side. Not many people know that there are more than 15 different environmental conventions, each one of them through their own processes, their own decisions. That means like people like me need to pay attention, follow, and negotiate 15 different processes because everything was fragmented. You have biodiversity on one side, you have climate and carbon on the other, you have ocean on one side, you have migratory birds on the other side, you have migratory species that are not birds on the other side, and the reporting commitments are so messed up, to not say the F word, because it's really, really bad. And for each one of these conventions, we need to create at least 3 reports every 5 years. One on commitments, so what are you committing to do? One on how you're doing on those commitments, and another one on a long-term vision going 20, 30 years down the road. 3 times 15, 45. These reports can cost all the way up to millions of dollars, especially when you go to the climate space to define your climate targets. So every 5 years, you have people in government in every country of the world spending at least, let's say that the reports are only $500,000-ish, so that's about 20-something millions that only go to write papers. So we hear a lot about people drowning under sea level rise, but we don't hear much about people like me drowning on paperwork that limits our capacity to act. Now, I've never been in the corporate world, though I regulate the corporate world, but my question is, how do you deal with this? Because I bet on the corporate side, you also have so many different frameworks that you need to report to, and that eats up your budget. So tell us a little bit about the bureaucracy in terms of sustainability on the corporate side.
Yeah, of course, it's a lot of effort, but as well, you can use it, like all of the reporting exercise, you can actually use them to audit your organization and to upskill your teams. That's what I see. And I'm not going to use regulatory reporting. I'm going to use the last SBTI Net Zero Corporate Standard exercise. When they launched the questionnaire, our decarbonization team used that to be able to talk to the different teams like procurement, finance. They were able to pressure test all of the systems that we had, and we said, okay, are they resilient enough? Are the data systems consistent to what the future looks like? Because there are some demand signals that are able to tell you how you need to rearrange your infrastructure. However, yes, reporting is a lot, but you should not concentrate all of your efforts there, because right now, standing still in sustainability is like falling behind. You need to understand in which buckets you can make the difference, which are the things in your organization that make sense. So I mentioned a little bit about Tabasco, and that made sense for the organization because when you look at volatility, cost increases after the pandemic was up and down. So it was about resilience. I do think that it is a half and half. Of course, yes, try to streamline as much as possible. Try to use those ones as exercises to see your risk areas, your opportunities, to talk to your leadership and even get them to understand where the main buckets that you need to start investing or paying more attention on. And then it's part of the sustainability strategy in general and how you manage it, but don't let reporting to eat all of your capacity.
Thank you. Any other shot?
I mean, for us, and Alex is here from my team, we've even become like financial advisors. And I always say like we're scrutinized on everything, from everything we do, the reporting that we have. Even on our donation program, there's so many regulations, even just to give product away by country, and all the paperwork that needs to be filed. And so we deal with that. I would say internally at the corporate level, I am very fortunate that I have teams within. For me, my biggest impact is tax, accounting. We call it transformational finance. And so anything I do from a circularity perspective has an impact on those. And I'm very fortunate that the team that leads those different functions is very, very open to anything we come to them with. They always joke, like whenever I set up a meeting with them, they're like, "Oh, you're gonna try something new." Yeah. But I think it's also part of the DNA of the company, where even though we are a big company, we still act as a small company from the collaboration perspective. So I'm very fortunate on that part.
That's great. And at Perdue, we're trying to take a look at the entire supply chain and implement ways to digitize a lot of the information as well, utilizing AI to track movements of trucks, loadouts, how farmers are doing in terms of yield and production by area. And so we want to sort of lean on the data aspect to help us with that reporting. It is a tall task, and we're thinking of moving from all that financial reporting to how can we measure from a digital perspective and lean less on the financial reporting and more on the actual sustainability reporting that can then obviously translate over into the financial part of our business. So it's all about digitizing and utilizing AI to track our emissions through how energy moves, how waste streams come back into the system, and that's how we're going to hopefully be able to measure and report a little bit more efficiently.
Fantastic. Your answer leads me to the next question that I had, and it's about AI. How has AI helped you in your work, both in terms of getting results, but also in terms of the reporting? How does your company deal with AI, specifically in terms of sustainability? Anyone?
So AI is really important for us, and we look at from the production with farmers in the field. We've created what's called Perdue EarthSmart app, and we basically created an AI agent that will help work with farmers to optimize their farming practices and collect the data real time. That real time field level data allows us then to understand the footprint of the grain that's coming into our facilities. When we add the digitized AI portion of our supply chain to that, we can create a product carbon footprint for 400 products like that. And so that's how we're moving towards the future, incorporating AI into our systems so that we can create that efficiency and that 24/7 monitoring of our footprint on the products that we produce.
Sandy?
For us, AI, it's more not on the reporting side, but more on the side on how we upskill the teams that are customer facing. Because our European team created this tool named Blue Eye. So you enter the customer that you're talking to, and it really like matches like which are the target or target areas that you both have in common. So in that way, you have a way more focused conversation, because we tend, as sustainability professionals, like to want to change the world in one meeting. And that truly allows you to focus the conversation and get one or two things actually done.
So now a completely different question, but how do you all got that spark to work in sustainability and specifically to get into circularity? What's that story? Where does that passion come from?
I can start. So, I used to run customer care for Logitech, and so I was in charge of handling our customers. And the CEO at the time, he was my boss, and he kept saying, "You have to move to supply chain. You have to," and I always would keep on saying, "Give me another month, give me 2 months." And he finally said, "You're moving to supply chain tomorrow." And I didn't have a choice. And he sent me to a warehouse to work from there for 9 months. And he said, "You're gonna see everything, you're gonna do everything." So I did pick and pack, I did inventory control, I did returns. And where I saw the biggest opportunity was returns, because I kept asking, what happens with all the product that comes back? Oh, we recycle, or we maybe liquidate. And I remember going to my boss and saying, there has to be something else. Like, oh, this is great product. It's mostly buyer's remorse returns. And in the US is mostly the reason for the returns. And so he said, well, do a small project and then prove to me that this is something that you're gonna be focused on. And so I did a project, and I saved the company about $5 million a year just on that project alone. And I said, I wanna do more. And so I enrolled into a sustainability strategy course for 9 months. And then I told him, I'm ready to reinvent this. And he said, okay, you have full liberty to do this however you want. And it took me about 2 years to implement all the circular models that we support today.
Superb. Beautiful story.
Love it.
Bar is high. What's the next story?
Mic drop. Well, my background is actually aeronautical engineering, so nothing to do with sustainability.
I didn't know that.
I was very, very passionate about solving complex challenges, and I started to work at a hangar at an airport, and I realized that I didn't like that. So I started to look at different things and started to do internships in R&D, started to work with cross-functional teams, and one day the company that I was working for, they got acquired by a German company, by a German group. So all of a sudden, we started to have this function named sustainability, and they nominated me for it because I was very good at working cross-functionally. And the more that I started working on it, the more that I started learning the impact and the endless possibilities, the more that I started to learn about innovation. I was sure that I wanted to do that for the rest of my life. And I keep, every day I keep learning. Every day there's a new thing on how to collaborate with people, how to solve a new challenge, how to help to have a positive impact. Yes, of course, sometimes we feel very overwhelmed with the noise, but at the same time, I keep reminding myself that the capital markets are still sending signals, the consumers are still demanding for the things that we're working on, and the regulatory frameworks, yeah, sometimes very slow, but they're still going on. So I really want to summarize it to a project or a function, but if you ask me, I keep learning every day why I'm so passionate about this, and this only keeps growing from my side.
Thank you. Scott?
I love it. I grew up on a small dairy farm in south central Pennsylvania, and I remember the days back in early 2000s, late 1990s, I'm dating myself a little here, $8, $9 100-weight milk. It was really hard to farm. I could see my family struggling. So that moved me into agriculture, right? So I've got my degrees in agriculture and then worked for a large-scale crop input company in the Midwest, ran a fertilizer terminal. So large-scale agronomy, migrated to more consumer approach in terms of lawn fertilizers, and then moved to actually a food company. And so at Perdue, I began in our Pioneer seed business, migrated to a farm input business, migrated to our poultry litter management business, which I converted to composting with the assistance of a CEO, of course. It was not my total project. But so we took and produced compost from our material that went back on the acre. Then I moved into organic and non-GMO production, really working with the land, and then into specialty crops, so canola and sunflower and the other oil seeds. And they're like, you're an agronomist and you've been through our entire business, so we crown you sustainability. So move into that, and just like Sandra and Sacni had mentioned, it's every day is learning, and every day to meet new people. I just met one in the room this morning. Thank you. From Corsair, right? And just our connection. We live 3 hours away. Works on recycling plastic and plastic credits for EPR, extended producer responsibility. And these kind of events are great. They're great for networking, and we all think alike. Isn't that awesome? And when we work together and collaborate, we get a lot more done. So it drives my excitement every day. Sandra, Sacni invited me to join on this panel. I was certainly honored, but these two are special people as well. So thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing all of that. I think it's only fair to share mine too. So my upbringing was in a rural farm. However, I went to study economics because I wanted to be an investment banker. I wanted to drive nice cars, have groupies, to quote the Pussycat Dolls. But when I went back home to Panama, the banks wanted to pay me shit, like really, really low salaries. And I said, oh, I don't want to be an investment banker in Panama. That probably works best in the US. And the Ministry of Environment gave me a better offer. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna give it a try. I'm gonna go there. And they said, do you have a visa? Do you speak English? And I'm like, yes. And they said, you're gonna be a climate negotiator. And I was like, wow, what the hell is that? Like, how can you negotiate like a climate? So then my first week, I was given the IPCC reports, you know, like this massive 500 pages report. Back then, we didn't have ChatGPT or Claude to summarize it, but I found out there was a summary for policymakers. And I'm like, I'm in government, I'm policymaker, I'm just gonna read the summary. And reading it, my entire upbringing started making sense. You know, I'm from the driest area of Panama, so heavy droughts, lack of potable water, freaking outages. And then I was reading those things in a report, El Nino, you know, crop failure and all of that, and I'm like, I am climate change. You know, I grew up through like all of these. We just didn't have, you know, anything to call it, and then the rest is history. So, recruitment. We talked about how do you keep your team motivated. But I think another thing that is hard is how do you get the right people to come join your team, especially because that 7%. You know, and part of the reason we haven't closed that gap is because there are not enough people that know about this. Knowing is one thing. We don't have enough experts, which is another level of knowing, let alone the experts that we have, you know, in sustainability, my friends. Sometimes we're a little bit radical and we look at the corporate side as the evil, like the ones that don't want to do the right stuff. So even for me, you know, in government, recruitment is hard. I bet for you, you might face some challenges. Could you share some insights on what are those challenges in recruitment and how do you deal with it? This was not
recruiting is really, really tough. But we're taking a different approach. We're trying to get involved with universities earlier so that we can influence students when they're sophomores and juniors and influence curriculum to help train them to what we need from a corporate perspective. And we want to do that earlier. We'll have 62 interns at Purdue this summer.
Oof, love it.
Which is fantastic and gives them an opportunity to learn about the business, learn about the things that we're doing, and then, you know, we look to provide them opportunities as they move forward. So sustainability, we'll have a sustainability intern this year as well. So tying that connection together as well. So getting earlier in the process, recruiting younger, and helping to influence the curriculum, we hope will pay off.
For me, I had to build my teams from the ground up, so I was able to really find the right people to get them started. And my strategy is I mentor a lot of people within the company. And so as I mentor them, I start trying to get them involved into sustainability or circularity, because to me, the way that we can make the biggest impact is when we have people that know our company from other areas and they can correlate the benefit. And so I always have people like volunteering for projects. My team is not a big team, and for all the things that we do, we're a quite small team. For me, that's how I do it, through networking through the company.
So it's non-linear. It's
No.
Sandy?
Same, it's not linear, but at the same time, we don't have that much of an issue at Brambles because we're very vocal about the credentials and there are a lot of different certifications, like that's a talent attraction. And there are many people in the organization that join because of sustainability, because of what we do. However, when we're recruiting, we try to prioritize the internal talent, people that already know the business but have the passion to go deeper and to have this technical layer. So a lot of the mentorship piece plays into that because then you can understand what are the type of skills that you need for that role. There's some that they're like way more technical, some that you need like more stakeholder management. So you want to make sure that you place the right talent in the right position because if not, you're going to kill their passion.
Fantastic. So now we have some time for questions from the audience. I'm going to give you 5 minutes for you to think about it while we do another question with the panel. So I'm the climate envoy from Panama. I'm in charge of regulation that will impact business, compliance that will need to be complied with in the future. What would you tell if you had your regulator sitting in front of you? You know, what things can we do to push you to accelerate these efforts, and how can we help those efforts?
I would say do it faster. Do it faster, and also make sure that at least to start, there has to be an incentive. I hate to say it, but whenever you can incentivize companies to do the right thing, the buy-in is going to happen faster. And make the whatever regulations clear as well. A lot of the regulations can be very vague. And so that gets them to not be as prioritized as they should. So that would be my ask.
For me, I guess that you assume that we know all of the processes. In my experience, the first time that I went to a COP, I didn't know anything. I was like, wow, I just realized that, yes, I've been so many years working in sustainability, but I really don't know if the day of tomorrow, making a change on that space, I wouldn't even know where to start. That was like my initial curiosity of like, okay, how can I get to know more about this? And then I started to get myself more involved into these chambers, like industry chambers and groups that had like more of these channels, but it seems that there needs to be a little bit more of the opening to have like a two-way conversation. And again, I don't think that I can talk from an individual, like private actor perspective, because these type of discussions need to happen on an industry level. If you're not going to create solutions that maybe function to one, but not for everyone, or yeah.
Okay, any questions? Right here, sir. Your name?
Sean Stockman. I work with a company called Return Center, and we're a platform for reverse logistics. We're primarily in the electronic space, and I have to say I ran into CHEP 20 years ago, and I thought you guys were nuts because we would go on site and pack up used computers to get them back into a refurbisher or remarketer or recycler, and we'd find CHEP those blue CHEP pallets everywhere. I'm like, I know they don't know where these are, so they're like leaking out of your loop. Okay, 20 years later, you guys are brilliant, and I think about how the business model of owning a product and never losing control also means you never lose responsibility for that product. And if you think about EPR legislation that forces manufacturers to take responsibility for their products, that's essentially what, by compliance, they're driving toward, right? So the question is, and I know that like in the electronics industry, there's companies like HP and Dell that are moving toward a device as a service, meaning they will perennially own the life cycle of that product, therefore take responsibility for the environmental impact of that all the way through, right? So the question is, do you think that that business model, particularly in reusable packaging, which is what a pallet is, right? Do you think that would work for other packaging. Like if you think about EPR legislation around packaging, consumer packaging in California, I'm from Maine, we were the first one to pass that for packaging. Do you think the ownership model of renting a package to go out and have to come back is a way to maybe solve that EPR compliance riddle that is so hard to manage?
Definitely. And last year I had the opportunity to go to a meeting in which I got to know an actor named Pack Collective. So Pack Collective, they were interacting with all of the beauty retailers, Sephora and Ulta, and they were functioning as a third party because all of these solutions, yes, they're gonna work, but the education to the consumer, because that's the biggest challenge, to make the consumer, well, first of all, not to sacrifice their convenience, right? Like circular economy cannot make harder the process of the user for their product or solution. Yes, I think that it can be done, but it needs to be a third party. And of course, all of these processes or new solutions need to be assessed by someone that already operated a network of logistics and reverse logistics, because if you build a solution like that, every time you lose an asset, it's not only a financial leak, it's also a point in which the circular economy is broken.
Hi, I work for BASF in corporate sustainability. I had a question for you, Juan Carlos, but anyone else can also answer too. In your experience, is working from a regulation standpoint, like more how Europe does, or an incentivizing standpoint, which one is more effective in driving sustainability?
Capacity development, which was not in your list. So I'm gonna give you an example. Back in 2020, I was tasked to design the Panamanian carbon market. And you know how carbon market works. You know, companies need to measure their carbon footprint to see how far away they are from being, zero emissions. Then you buy some units to offset part of that footprint, or you buy some units to offset all of that footprint. So, I was coming very bullish. We're gonna start, we're gonna bring companies, rein them in, they will have to report and all of that, and then we hit the first barrier. There are not enough people in Panama that know how to measure carbon footprint. So we could not start a program because there was not enough capacity in country. So what we started was a series of government-led workshops. We did like more than 50 in a span of like 3 months to try to get companies excited about this. And what we found out is that we could not start the market because even with that excitement, we still needed experts. So instead of starting a mandatory market, we created a program that is not called Carbon Market. It's called the Reduce Your Footprint Program. Right now, we have more than 200 companies that measure their carbon footprint, that report it, get it certified. Some of the largest banks in Panama are fully compensating their carbon footprint, and we're still not a mandatory carbon market. Right now, we're issuing the second phase of regulations, and we are expanding the pilot phase until 2030, because still my goal is to get the price of doing all this reporting down before I request companies to do it mandatory. But we already have companies doing, all the cycle in their own way, and I gotta give credits to the mid-level younger officers in those companies. Because at the beginning, we were getting companies joining this pilot program, not because the CEO knew it was good, or not because he knew it was the way, but because a mid-level sustainability officer will not stop, knocking on the door of the CEO to say, you need to join this program because it's the right thing to do. Right now, we have about 220, and the goal is to increase that to 1,000 within the next 3 years before we leave office. So even before incentive, even before regulation, in some geographies like mine, you have to do capacity development. And that's when I learned, they're not evil. They just don't know how to do it. Or they just don't have the time to do it because they're so focused in their bottom line. And we, government, have never actually come and said, hey, this is the pathway that you need to follow. Because we also didn't know, as governments all over the world. So that's my answer. We always start with capacity development. Now we're doing the sustainable finance taxonomy. We picked 5 of the largest banks 5 of the largest insurers in the country. They are doing a pilot taxonomy. Once we test it out with them, we're gonna issue a first voluntary standard for them to do it, and after like a second or third cycle, then we're gonna do it mandatory. We're also starting with the standard from the Task Force for Climate-Related Financial Disclosures, so that companies can also measure the risk. But now they're telling me, dude, like you're coming with so many things at once that we didn't know. You need to slow down a little bit. So we passed that component to next year so that we focus in taxonomy this year. So a lot of my work is capacity development. And I can also do that because we're carbon negative as a country. We have been capturing more carbon than any other country in the region, and we expect to remain carbon negative until the early 2030s, and that's why the mandatory requirements are going to start around 2030. We've done enough to clean up, so now we're taking that time to train our private sector to get where we need them to get. Sorry, that was a very long answer. Any other question from the room? Wow, no more questions. Any final thoughts, any final messages that you want to send off to the room and the people that are watching us live, and then the people that are going to see this recording once it is on EarthX TV? Final point?
Don't stop learning. Keep collaborating. We'll get there.
Same. Never stop fighting. Like, we have to share as much as possible our learnings, because that would help us get to the end goal faster.
There's so much more conversations to have, and now more than ever, it's very critical that we're open to be honest and straightforward about it, because that's how we're going to get to move the needle.
Thank you so much to this amazing group of speakers. Please, a round of applause for them. And I cannot close off without plugging in my country once again. I would like to invite you to the Peacock Terrace, where we're doing the high-level opening of the Nature Summit, and where Juan Carlos Navarro, my boss, and Juan Carlos Monterrey, you get 2 for 1, Juan Carlos from Panama, he's going to be announcing the launch of an incredible initiative that we call the Universal Declaration of Nature Rights. So we have gotten clearance from our president to go to the UN and push for a universal level principles on the rights of nature. Right now we have human rights, we have indigenous people rights, but we don't have nature rights. And that is why people do with nature whatever they want to do, because nature has no rights. So we're pushing that onto the UN, and we hope to get it done within the next 2 to 3 years. Many hard conversations will be happening, but is the way forward. Thank you so much for being with us, and please come to the Peacock Terrace. Bye-bye.